Well, welcome back to episode 2 of Enough About Steve, the Enough About Me tribute show, of course, to Kirk's very first podcast. Obviously, Jared Carabas led him to podcasting and then he took the ball and ran with it. So, loved Enough About Me. And my first guest on Enough About Steve was Kirk Minahan last year. But today I have one of the producers of Enough About Me, and of course, we all know him, Dave Cullinane, producer of KMS. Morning, Carl. It's dinner time here and breakfast where you are. How are you?
Yep. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good evening. Yeah, that's right. That is funny, the intro. I don't know. Do you remember? I don't remember how many episodes of Enough About Me I got under my belt. I feel like I only actually produced one, I think.
The Dershowitz one or the one before?
So I don't think I touched the Dershowitz one. I don't think I actually edited it. It was the Netflix one that he recorded after it, maybe. I forget, or maybe it was before. I can't even remember now, but best case scenario, I was in that studio with him for 2 episode recordings at least. And then I don't know if I actually edited the other ones, which is, it's still wild to look back on and think about now. It's just
Yeah, I had to listen to some of them this afternoon, trying to find where you appeared in them. And one thing that struck me was that Kirk really didn't talk about as much on air as he does on KMS because of the overlords at Entercom. So you had to kind of go online and to the Minifan show to find out what happened to you. But
Yep.
yeah, I couldn't find sort of much of you in the Enough About Me feed. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
what I
remember
lo-
being nervous. Just sorry before you go on. I
no,
remember being nervous because I think it was it were MHB and DEC, were they around back then? Like
oh,
they
absolutely.
so they
They kept
interviewed
Kirk
me.
alive, don't you remember?
So they started the Minifan show while he was on Kirk and Callahan. Is that how that all happened?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, so
When
yeah, I forget
Murchison
how.
came around.
So I remember texting Kirk after he hired me because they wanted to interview me on the Minifan show for getting hired, I believe. And I was on a bachelor party, and I remember like being nervous, and I texted Kirk, and I was like, "Are you okay if I do this interview?" And he's like, "Yeah, just don't break any news." And I didn't. I mean, I was like, I don't think we have any news to break, so I don't know what I would do. But I just remember being super nervous for that interview because it was like the a final day of a bachelor party. I did it from a hotel and all this stuff. And I don't know. I just remember being nervous for that moment. So it's even funny to hear names like DEC and MHB now.
I
It's
need to
like,
think you were nervous going on that shit podcast.
well, it was just like, it wasn't nervous about like talking to them. It was more about like how Kirk would react to that. And I kind of felt douchey. Like I haven't even started the job. And here I am saying yes to these guys. And I don't know, it was just kind of insane. But yeah, those were interesting times for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to talk about all that in this edition of Enough About Steve. I almost said enough about me, but enough about Steve. We've got a lot to get through. One thing I loved about Enough About Me is quite often Kirk was talking to people I didn't really know, but he just made them interesting. They were Boston personalities that being from Sydney, I never heard of, but he was able to, touch on the interesting parts of their life. And, Kirk's such a great interviewer. So, look, I'm not as good as interviewer as Kirk, so I don't know how interesting I'm going to make Carl to all the listeners and viewers out there, but I'm going to try my best. For those looking out for Mena's Live, Mena's Live is coming back. It's not dead. I'm just focusing on Enough About Steve for the next little while, but then Mena's Live will be back soon. So yeah, Mena's Live's not dead, but yeah, just wanted to talk to Carl. So Carl, I mean, let's start on the latest show actually. Wednesday's show. Kirk said he thought you probably were a nervous kid. Is that right? Were you a sort of nervous kid?
I don't think so. I think I definitely do give off kind of like nervous energy. I think I have undiagnosed ADD for sure. Like that's just a definite. I think things just like pop into my head and I spit them out just kind of like randomly. It is weird. There is something about I've wanted to be in radio. Like I wanted to be in radio since I was a kid. There's something, and I feel like it happens with a lot of other radio personalities. There's something about like being behind a microphone where you're almost like more honest. You would think it would be the opposite, but you're like I'm more comfortable with the microphone. And I think maybe there's kind of this like awkward energy of jitteriness to it. I don't know. I'm still getting used to that room. So I don't think it's so much about being nervous when I was a kid. It's just still it's a different type of atmosphere, getting used to it. I don't think I'm nervous in there, but it's impacting me in some way. But so I would answer, no, I wasn't a nervous kid by any stretch of the means.
Okay, so what was Junior Cull like then? I know what you have a big family, like 5 siblings.
Yep,
So
yep. I'm the
I
youngest of
imagine
six.
what was that?
I'm the youngest of six.
Wow. So I imagine it was pretty wild, and being the baby, you probably spoiled little brat. Is that the way it
Yep.
was, or
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. My mama's boy, spoiled the shit out of me, went everywhere she went, almost just to like get shit from her. Like I would go to Walmart with her, so she would buy me like 3 DVDs. And back then that was like kind of a big deal. They're fucking $30 back then or whatever. So yeah, spoiled fucking rotten. Older sibling, my oldest sister, the oldest of the crew is 10 years older. So yeah, it was, it wasn't like one of those, I didn't get like the shit kicked out of me or anything by my brother or anything like that, but it was definitely more just spoiled kid and stuff like that. So I don't have any like crazy stories. I'm closer with my siblings now than I was when I was a kid. If that, I don't, it's, and maybe that's for everybody, but I didn't go everywhere with my brothers or anything like that. And my sisters were super close, but yeah, nothing crazy to report, just normal,
what
normal
was
middle
some of
class.
the memorable events though? Was there anything memorable when you think of your childhood? Something happened to you that sticks out.
I have a horrible memory with this stuff, but I know I always looked up to my brother just because he was an unbelievable hockey player all the way. I mean, he played, he didn't go to Division One. He played, like he was just great when he was like going through high school. And he probably, if he kind of kept his head straight and kept his shit together, he probably would have played D1 hockey. And I always looked up to him and always went to, all his high school games and things like that. I would say kind of when they hit high school, just kind of the memorable stuff is just like the attitude change of them not giving as much of a fuck about me. I'll never forget when I split my head open at one of his hockey games. I was running under the bleachers, and somebody grabbed my hand and I was running behind him, and we were running, and he ducked because he saw a piece of wood under the bleachers, and I didn't have time to duck. So I hit the wood under the bleachers and split my head open, bleeding profusely from the head, walking in front of a crowded hockey rink. And the first person I see is actually my sister, Lori, who's the middle girl of the crew. And she's with all of her high school friends. And I'm like, Lori, I have a crazy headache. I'm literally bleeding profusely, but she just, from the back of my head, she can't see it. Like, I feel awful. It's just whatever. And she's like, literally says, get the fuck away from me. I'm with my friends. And then when I walk past her,
You could have bled out.
yeah, somebody notices the blood, and all of a sudden the crowd starts screaming or whatever. I find my dad. The game literally stops. Ambulance comes. So like that's kind of like the memory of. I don't know why. I don't know why that just came out when you asked that
No,
question.
well,
But
obviously it jumped out. I mean,
yeah,
it sets you up well for working with Kirk,
yeah.
copying all the
They were
blows.
because they were older, and like obviously we played together as kids when I was super young and stuff like that. But because when they got older, they were kind of off doing their own thing, and
Yeah.
I had my crew. So I was like always with my best friends growing up, like freaking wiffle ball and baseball every single day after school, every
Yep.
single day in the summer. So it was more, obviously we were a close family, but I spent more time with my friends than I did my brothers and sisters growing up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Imagine calling those friends now. They'd be so thrilled to speak to
Well,
you
now I
because
have
you're
a
on a
little bit of,
podcast.
yeah, maybe because I'm a little, yeah, I'm
You got
popular
some,
now, so I
you
can
got a
just call them.
clout, some clout.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually,
you get
my buddy for work went to Australia I want to say he went for 3 months. Had a great time, by the way, and he brought his KMS shirt and he took a picture from there. I think the show retweeted it, not knowing, but he's my best friend, one of the roommates, of course, and but yeah, he had a great time in Australia. Just random side note for you.
Well, I want to meet some Minifans when they come down under. COVID's fucked that up though.
Yeah,
So did you get
sure
in
has.
trouble as a kid? Everyone thinks of you as a bit of a snake. Were you snaky
Uh,
as a kid?
No, pussy. Like
Stealing?
total pussy growing up.
Okay.
No trouble to report. Eighth grade, I got arrested for I guess you could say like hanging out with like it wasn't a big deal, but like the kid was edgy back then, like setting a fire to a tree in the woods, and it ended up turning into like a pretty big fucking fire. We run from the cops, we get caught, so we got like I don't know. Obviously, nothing ended up happening, but like it was like basically like arson in the woods and shit like that. That was like the worst thing I ever did. And he went in there with horrible intentions. He wanted to light a frog. Like literally, he should have probably turned into a terrorist because he was like wanted to spray a frog with lighter fluid and then light it on fire and watch it like jump around. He was a fucked up brain. But that was like the worst thing ever. And that was like, that traumatized me. Like that, I was like, I took a risk for the first time in my life, like doing something stupid in the woods. And then like, that just traumatized me. So I became a bigger pussy after that than I already was.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Certainly affecting your risk taking on KMS so far, but we'll get to that.
Yep.
What did you study in college when you finished school?
Communication. So I actually graduated with print journalism.
Yep.
But I always knew like radio was always what I wanted to do. So in college, I was always doing the radio, the typical radio internships for like the country station, the oldies station. I don't think I ever did EEI. I didn't do sports. My first like being around EEI was working for WRKO, the talk station. So that was always like the print journalism. They didn't have a broadcast program. So it was always just communications, and print journalism was what I went for. Yeah.
Right. And why is that? Did you just love the sort of Boston media market? Did you listen to the Big Show and all those
So I think it was
things?
just, yeah, it just got imprinted in me from a young age. So I think it was back then, I think I was like 4. My cousin was dating, um, I can't say like a popular guy on the radio, but he was on Kiss 108, which is a major station in our market. He was the traffic guy, but I don't know if it was the morning show or the after. I forget which hour, but he was the traffic guy there, in more of a role than just like reading the traffic, right? Like he had a role on the show, and he took me into the studio on a Saturday, and it was one of those, I guess you could just say like one of those memorable kid moments, right? Like where he recorded me. I had the cassette like basically my entire life. It's probably still at my parents' house. And it just kind of became like imprinted in my brain that like that's what I was gonna do. Right. And so it's just that was kind of the path that led me to wanting to be in radio. And then, wherever the fuck that went after that, I guess.
And I guess, have you given up on your sort of dream now of hosting your own show, or is that
Oh,
still
for
something?
sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm not a host by any stretch of the imagination. I love the energy. Like Kirk, a show like KMS is what I always wanted to be a part of. I love the experience I got in kind of the weird places in radio that I worked. It taught me a lot of things, and I was allowed to fuck up without any consequences. You know what I mean? And that's a good way to learn when you're super young in the industry. So I wouldn't trade it, but it kind of it definitely, like, I didn't get like any training that would turn me into some kind of like on-air host by any means. I'm definitely more suited for, getting the shit kicked out of me, making fun of me and laughing and having a good time. And I'd prefer that anyway. That's the show I'd rather be a part of anyway. So
Yeah, well, and looking for this episode, you can just relax. I'm the host, no pressure.
sit back.
We can just talk,
Yep.
pretend no one's listening. So, what about the first time you worked with Kirk? I was listening to some Enough About Me this afternoon in preparation, and I didn't hear much of you. I did hear a very hopeful Kirk Minahan. It's interesting
Yep.
how that all changed pretty quickly. But I mean, we're talking what, 2017 now.
Yep. Somewhere around there. Yeah.
You first worked with him. How did that happen? Did Entercom just put you with him, or did he ask for you?
Yeah, so I believe it was Carlson Mosdes, who was running digital. I think he's still there. He's a really nice guy. I didn't really have as much of a relationship with him, so I wonder how, if he suggested me as a candidate to Kirk. I wonder how I kind of came to his head, came to his brain in those moments. But I believe Kirk said that he recommended me. I think it was 6 months earlier than that. I had been offered the position to produce Ordway, Maloney, and Fourier, and I ended up turning it down. And
it's a bit of an ego there, Dave. That was a massive show, and you just said no.
It was one of the, like, one, I guess, well, the money was awful, but also I don't know. I knew at that point, like, I had enough radio experience. I wanted to do what was like where I wanted to go in radio if I was going to do it.
So obviously you're a big fan of Kirk at the time.
Huge fan of Kirk, and he was doing the shit. It was more, to me, it was more what he was doing, what Jerry was doing. It was just more authentic, it was more real, and it was more about the laughs, and even the awkward and serious stuff, like had laughter in it too. You know what I mean? Or the uncomfort was enjoyable. The uncomfortable atmosphere was enjoyable, right? And I just wanted to be a part of that shit. I'd done so much of that pre-planned, scripted out bullshit, boring radio stuff. And so that's why, like, we make fun of the Boston.com morning show that I did. Like, I booked like 6 fucking guests a show for that thing. And it was just so regimented, and all the ideas that I had that I wanted to do with that stuff, with that show, whether it was stupid, whether it would work, whatever, it was always turned down, because it was always just this, safe, boring. Nobody really gave a shit. Everybody just did their job. So I remember quitting and being like, just like I was making good money there, and I just quit because I just wasn't happy. There was no competitive spirit. There was no creative energy being put out. It was just kind of like, okay, what's the news of the day? Book the reporter. Okay, who's going to analyze that story then? Book an analyst. It was just like, it was bullshit. So I wanted to be a part of something specifically that if I was going to not go back to, but if I was going to work on a podcast or work in radio, I wanted it to be just primarily like based and built upon laughter, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. Want to have some
So,
fun.
or laughter in some other way. I just wanted that, but just to know that it was going to be a sports show. The biggest thing that was appealing to me was that like Felger and Maz were so dominant, and I don't think you think I would assume you hear me enough by now. Like, I don't have an ego in the sense I think I'm great, but like I have this like spirit behind me that's like, oh, Felger and Maz are number one. Like, I want to fucking try it and come at them, right? Like, there's just like a little bit of competition there. I had that in my brain, so it did weigh on me. Like, I wanted to do that, but then at the end of the day, I just kind of knew like it wasn't for me to do a show like that. So like, it's just a sporto show or anything like that. So yeah, that didn't end up working out. But working with Kirk, I mean, I think I ended up having two interviews involving Carlson and Kirk, and I thought they went well. I think did he say that he thought I came off arrogant at some point, like I was cocky or something in those meetings? I don't know. He always like I feel like he reads into those situations so much. Like, I remember I was suggesting a studio, like I suggested Red 13, and he even back then thought I had some deal with them, and it was more just like, no, I mean, how many studios are there that aren't radio stations? Like, it was just a studio I knew of, and I liked the atmosphere, and I thought he would. So yeah, everything was normal. I don't even remember too much communication in general from the content standpoint. I mean, like, we're either gonna get into it or just remind people it was fucking 48 hours, so there's not much to work from in that sense.
What was Kirk like then as opposed to now?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was basically the same. Like I said, I don't have too much experience to go off with, but all of our conversations were, I would say, basically the same as what we're doing now. I think the radio.com, I don't know if we got into it. Like, I was kind of hopeful, and it's fine. It's Kirk's show, so don't get me wrong, but you can put ideas and, put it out there. I was kind of hopeful it would turn into more of like Howard's not copying Howard Stern, but that Howard Stern atmosphere where like we could be the main show in the big platform of radio.com, where like it wouldn't be weird to utilize all the resources of Entercom at that time. So let's say the rock station was having fucking the Rolling Stones in studio. Like, we would get to benefit from that, and we'd have them in our. So like how Stern will have the band and they'd play. I don't know. I like had these dreams of that, where it was like this hybrid between what KMS is now, and then kind of like that Sternish, where you're interviewing somebody long form like he did with Stevie Van Zandt, but also Stevie has a guitar. I don't know. I like had those were kind of like my visions of those days. And at the end of the day, it would have been what Kirk wanted anyway. So it wouldn't matter. But that was just like more my brain was at. Because you got to remember, like radio.com. I mean, that was the biggest, it is still the biggest radio entity out there. They have resources, right? Like, they have access to artists. They have top 40 stations and stuff like that. So yeah, it would have been interesting to see how that all played out and how he would have just fucking shit all over those ideas for sure.
It's also interesting now. It's taken Entercom years to get onto the sort of digital train. They've just, relaunching his Odyssey. So it never would have happened. Obviously, you got fired because of what happened with Alan Dershowitz, and basically that, I think, boiled down to just sort of breakdown in communication in what Dershowitz thought he was coming on for, and then what actually happened. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, and just Dershowitz being an asshole and like causing a hissy fit over really like fucking nothing at the end of the day. Because Kirk says that he would have talked about the topic anyway. So it was a complete, and I think I've done through this, but I don't need to go through the whole thing. But like, I just responded to an existing email chain that I had with him. So it was kind of like I don't know, and I don't actually, that was a learning lesson for me because I don't do that anymore, but it was common. It was kind of like, all right, this is a familiar person. He's replying to an email. He's not sending me one cold or whatever. So unfortunately, like he just, it's not even the topic, I don't think. Like he thought he was going on a Boston Globe entity. He wrote for the Boston Globe at the time because that was the subject, Matt, that was the subject of the email that I replied to. I didn't lie who he was talking to. I said, can you talk to Kirk Minahan? Right. So one quick Google search would say that Kirk Minahan didn't work for the Boston Globe, obviously. So it was just, I'm not going to call it lazy. I definitely take responsibility for all the communication failure that led up to that moment for sure. But it was something that, like, if it didn't happen there, that was like how I like typically responded to emails and shit. So it's like something was going to go wrong eventually for me in that situation if I kept playing out scenarios like that. So I didn't mean to fucking fuck with it. Yeah, 20, there you go. I didn't mean to fuck with him deliberately in any way. I also really didn't know the Epstein stuff back then. I wasn't paying attention to that story in any fashion. I knew innately kind of from Twitter that Kirk was interested in Alan Dershowitz. And I was on, my brain was in enough about me mode and accumulating guests, right? So I was reaching out to a shit ton of people, whether we ended up having them or not, but I was whatever. Like I was reaching out to a shit ton of people just to try to get them. He was one of them. And that just spiraled, like that just went so quick. And I knew he was attainable too. That's why it's stupid. That one could have been way more gentle because he came on old shows of mine all the time. So yeah, that just sucked. And at the end of the day too, it was just, if I'm Entercom, I don't blame them whatsoever for firing me. He was causing a hissy fit about it, and if he sued, it's just a pain in the ass.
So did they fire you from Intercom? Was that what happened? Or
yeah. They, in the moment, I guess you could, I'm not gonna say suspend me. They were basically saying like, we're not gonna, don't come in for the rest of the week was one. And then like literally 90 minutes later, they called me. I remember where it was and they're just like, it's done. So I understood it for sure. I felt bad for Kirk because I knew all the stuff that Kirk was going through. And I was like, great. Like now I would have been, I knew I was going to be fine figuring out my life after that. It was literally 48 hours. I just knew I'd find another job, whatever. I was confident. I just felt bad because he did seem like very excited to be starting something new. And I definitely didn't want to be a disruptive person in that energy, I guess you could call it. So, yeah.
Was it shattering? You're so close to working with the probably number 2 radio talent in Boston. If you put Felger 1, Kirk 2, you have the job for 2 days and then all of a sudden it's taken away. Do you remember what that was like?
I remember being like severely disappointed. I remember thinking like that's the type of content that I always wanted to create, and I wondered if I'd get that opportunity to do it again. So I wouldn't say that I like went into some dark, deep depression and started drinking more or anything like that. It definitely was disheartening for sure. But I don't know. I'm kind of just an is what it is person, and I just moved on. But it did suck. It did suck. And then like, kind of being a part of, I don't know. Kind of being a part of the content after, like, because it was kind of a storyline about the whole thing. I didn't mind that it was a storyline. I didn't mind fucking around with it. I just like it did keep bringing me back to like that fucking sucks that I'm not actually a part of it anymore. So yeah, it was an is what it is thing. I was disappointed, but I guess I didn't let it like impact me in some major way. To go into some spiral.
Yeah, you didn't go to the train station or anything.
No.
And I guess it's got a happy ending because a few years later, you're on the KMS show as the producer and at Barstool, 2 dreams of yours. So
the Barstool thing, I think is a little overstated. I mean, I'm sure maybe you'll get into that. I don't really see where that's coming from that much, but I'm interested to find out.
You're interested to find out where it's coming from because you have to tell me. Like, I can't tell you how you feel.
Well, I mean, what gives off the impression that all I've ever wanted in life is to work for Barstool Sports? Or like sometimes you'll see comments or something being like, oh, he cares too much about being liked by Barstool. I don't really get that because even pre-Kirk, I mean, I'm just interacting as a nobody with content that I consume on Twitter. So I don't really like, that's what I consumed. Like I would go to Barstool first thing in the morning. That's what I would look at on social media. I think that's normal for everybody else. So everybody who's saying, oh, you're just obsessed with Barstool, these are the same people who have parody accounts about a podcast host. Like what's technically the difference? You're doing the same thing I'm doing. You're checking out.
Don't take it to heart.
No. I'm not like offended by it. I'm just interested because I think that's how
Well, I
Most
think it's
people, you go to the
it's
first
an
thing.
easy spot, isn't it? It's a soft spot. Then everyone knows you're a big fan of Barstool because of your interactions over the last few years. I mean, getting down on your knees and sucking Whitney off when he was in studio is a little bit of a giveaway
Sucking
that,
Whitney up when he was in studio with Kirk, when they were
yes,
fucking, oh, they were going at me. I mean,
well,
I think
I think that
Whitney,
when he was trying to push
but
you
even,
away, he was feeling
but even
uncomfortable.
then, like people, I mean, you suck off Kirk. What the fuck is the difference? Like, I think Ryan Whitney
I'm not
is on the same.
criticizing.
No, I know, but I'm thinking like Ryan Whitney is super talented. So like, why wouldn't, as a fan on social media, I be sucking that person off and saying I enjoy that person? I don't whatever.
Yeah, look, I think as well, it is just a contrast to Steve, who,
Yeah.
had no interest in anything Barstool really.
Yep.
So I think there's that contrast. And also, I think people know it annoys you. So people just like to needle you in it.
Yeah.
And
I always try to make it seem like it doesn't annoy me, but then you can feel the
yeah, I
temperature
can feel
rise.
it.
Yeah. It's not a bad form of annoy though. It's just I'm more interested in it, but whatever.
And also, you didn't help though, when Whitney was in there. Okay, so maybe you didn't have your mouth around his penis that I saw on the YouTube stream, but you
Yep.
were like 10 times more excited than any other show. So I think
Yeah.
that's why people think,
Well,
well,
I like that energy, and I like Kirk doing that stuff too. Like I like that shit talky energy, and so that like kind of fires me up a little bit. Like the random shit talk like just makes me laugh for some reason. So I think I was more fired up for that. I had met him, I want to say like 3 months like before, and it was like in a different form. It was on like a hockey podcast, and wasn't like I was fucking anything like that when I met him in that environment. So I don't know. Either way, it was, yeah, that was a learning lesson, not so much for the Ryan Whitney sense, but just like you don't have to be that amped up no matter what. Like I don't know. I was just too fired up that day, I guess, for
it
whatever
was a bad
reason.
day for Dave.
Yeah.
So you said how much you loved Ryan Whitney being there. Before you got to KMS, you had a little stint on the Callahan podcast.
Yep.
Um, how bored were you during those recordings?
I wasn't bored because I honestly appreciated the opportunity to just to work with and get to know Jerry. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. I understand the problems he and Kirk have, but he's a good person. He was great to me. I just find everything about him funny for some reason. Like
And he's another
what
titan of radio as well. I mean,
he's huge. Yeah, he's. I
huge in
said,
the Boston
yeah,
figures.
when I filled in when Steve went away for that 3 weeks, I said I thought Jerry had the most notable best radio career in Boston. And my premise of that was obviously longevity, but two, he said things that nobody else would say on the radio in an area that like you could say the stuff he says on WRKO, a conservative talk radio station. He was saying things that typically in liberal Massachusetts that you really not shouldn't be saying, but really people wouldn't have said on sports radio. And I give him credit for doing that. And he took risks and all that stuff. So I just think weighing all those things together, I think he had the best radio career in the city. That's my opinion. I think some people would say Matt Siegel. I would say Jerry Callahan. I'm not doing that to kiss his ass. I just think because he took risks, it weighs a little bit more. So yeah, it was a great opportunity. I really appreciated it. I just, from the show's perspective, I think people can clearly see I'm not like super into the political stuff by any means, but I also loved watching Jerry get so worked up, and I didn't mind like poking my voice into it to just like kind of poke him a little bit and fuck
Mm,
around a little bit, so as opposed to having, and I think Carano sounds great and that's where the podcast need to go anyway, like dialed in conservative wherever. I think he sounds great, but like from my enjoyment, I loved like jumping in and kind of like prodding him a little bit, and fucking
excellent.
around. Yeah, that's all.
Um, when you were producing Jerry's show, did it meet the expectations you had of the show in terms of listeners and quality as producer?
Um, yes and no. I actually thought the numbers were good for the show. So all that stuff actually was good. I always knew we needed some type of marketing arm to help promote the show. Like Jerry's audience was already tapped out. It was consistent. It was dialed in. It was sticky. It was loyal. So to grow, it needed like a Barstool Sports to help promote. Now, I don't mean Barstool specifically, but like a media entity with an audience, right? So I always thought that should be Outkick, which is Clay Travis's. Like they have an audience. If it was I think we've talked about it on the show. There was a debate between Outkick and Podcast One. Consultant was Podcast One, Dave was
And look what
Outkick.
happened.
My argument was always first of all, Podcast One is a radio company first. Like they were early in the game. The inner workings of the podcast world. They're all radio guys or whatever. They're just like a distributor of podcasts. They don't like, nobody goes to Podcast One as a loyal listener and is like indebted to that brand. So there was I knew you can promise marketing all day long. They're not going to give you shit. Clay Travis, however, who owns Outkick and the website outkick.com, has monthly uniques, has numbers to it where they have a built-in audience that when they promote you, there is a much better chance of you growing your audience there than a Podcast One, then a Westwood One, then whatever. So I always thought that would be the route the podcast would go. And it never worked out. We had an offer on the table. The consultant obviously won that war. Podcast One was the choice. That ended up going south. And then we tried to bring back Outkick, and it just kind of, I think maybe it was the purchase with Fox News ended up purchasing them, and maybe it was kind of around that same time period. So I think Kirk told me that Jerry thinks I fucked up the discussions. I don't remember that whatsoever. As at the end of the day, I presented Jerry with a contract from them months ago, so I don't know how I fucked anything up in that situation. But so I don't know. I hope that still potentially is on the table for them. I know they went subscription, but I still do think that, they're doing 4 days a week of free shows too. So I think there's still opportunity for them to grow, and the industry's still young, right? Like I'm not saying
it's a battle to get listeners now. There's so many podcasts, and
Yep.
there's so many good competitors that you've got to be good. Even Kirk,
Yep.
I would say, is unders probably expectations listening wise at the moment. So yeah, I just think it's a battle getting listeners. So you're at Jerry's, you're having a good time. Obviously, there's that big fight between Kirk and Jerry that's been relitigated in the last week ad nauseum. But just from your point of view, what was that like, kind of being in the middle of those two? Because they're both strong figures. You got Kirk flipping out, you got Jerry, who's pretty strident. You must have been caught in a tough spot.
I didn't look at it like that. I remember hearing Kirk say things like that. I didn't look at it like it was that big of a deal. I actually probably was way douchier about it, where I really took and I don't know if it was because, this is going to sound fucking so douchey. I don't know if it's because I worked in radio, but I felt like a big appreciation and admiration for those two in terms of what they built together and what they, put out there as a product on the radio. And their relationship and how raw and honest, and they talked about crying at each other's parents' funerals and shit like that. Like, I viewed them as like basically brothers. Like, that's how I looked at it. And in that role, when brothers would fight, I always felt like stay the fuck away from that. Like, that was, so maybe that's me being a pussy. Maybe that's me overthinking it. I don't know if it's smart. I don't know whatever it is, but I remember like when the text thing happened, I always felt like if that happened to me, I probably wouldn't have told Kirk that, because I wouldn't have wanted to come in between what I thought was a brotherly relationship. I don't blame him for doing it. I don't, he's loyal to Kirk in that moment.
Which text was this?
Like the text about, or all the stuff about Jerry and working with.
When he said should he
go work for Kirk? Yeah. I would never want to like do anything that would harm that like brotherly relationship. And once I told Kirk this, and it come back up, like once we kind of analyzed it and I got to know Jerry, I always viewed it as more, one, it was sarcastic, kind of tough guy, Jerry, ball busting. He's still, and it probably is part of the root of this problem, where it's like, you think it's okay to make fun of crazy Kirk, right? Kirk brought that up. I think we're learning that it could be fun, but there's also levels. And I think Jerry takes it to a different level that doesn't necessarily, it's too much. Let's put it that way. And then the other side of it is, I don't think there's any job in the world that Jerry Callahan would have said, yeah, go leave Howie Carr for. Yeah, go leave Ben Shapiro for. Yeah, go leave Dan Bongino. He insanely values conservative media. It could have been his wife that wanted to hire Steve, and he would have said no. Like, I honestly believe that. I could be totally wrong, but that was my viewpoint on that. So, but to go back to that, I always just kind of felt like stay out of it, but be honest if you're asked about it and it's raw. And I always gave my honest opinion. I remember that show after Sacco, I was saying like, I think Turtle Boy was saying they were welfare recipients or whatever. And I think I said, one, what are they going to do? Two, it's Kirk's fucking show. Three, like Kirk, as this is going on, will probably tell them what to do. Like he'll probably say, you guys can go do this. They did updates or whatever. So I think I was just trying to be as honest as possible when asked the questions, but I never really felt, I never felt like I was in the middle, like it was a big deal either
good.
way, right? We were in
Well, it is a big deal. They're still going on about it, but
they still go. No, but I mean, like my role, like my
your role.
involvement in that was never a big deal. And I've always viewed myself like I was an acquaintance of Kirk's at that point. I was acquaintance.
Probably still are.
Probably still am. And even Jerry, like Jerry and I basically did the show, Minor Talk after and we were doing it remotely because of COVID, we left the Legacy Club, and then it just became convenient to do remote recordings, even though it sounded like shit. It was just like I still viewed myself as an acquaintance of Jerry, which I probably still am. So it's like, why would I go deep into the middle of that one? It's just unnecessary. So
yeah. So what about when you heard the news that one Stephen Earl Robinson was packing up his kit bag and moving on from KMS to travel the country? What was your first reaction?
I don't know. I think I was shocked. I wasn't listening as much to KMS when that was all happening. So I was just shocked. I thought he was in kind of a good spot. I thought it was a good hybrid for him. I thought, and I've always said, I thought like Steve on the radio versus Steve working with Kirk is like two ginormously different things. I think he's a better radio talent today from working in that environment than he was when he filled in for Howie. So I think it was just more shock, but I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, you didn't immediately think I want the job, did you?
I didn't think. I don't know. I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say I didn't think I wanted the job. I don't really remember. I did reach out to Kirk though. Like Kirk texted me and said, "Do you have any producers that you think would be interested with this?" And I said, sure, I'll think about it. Would you consider me? So I guess you can't really say that. I don't think I thought of it as like, let me capitalize on this opportunity. Steve's finally gone. I didn't think of it like that, but I did when you process it, I did still think of myself, well, why wouldn't I consider that? Like, why wouldn't I reach out to Kirk and see?
I mean, when we messaged at the time, you did sort of voice concerns about maybe not wanting to just leave Jerry high and dry. You're such a good employee and loyal that you didn't want to just, dump him for the next gig.
Dump him with a producer who didn't know what he was doing. Yeah. No, I mean, I think even Kirk knew, like once Kirk texted me, that all played out so fast. I knew Kirk was going to be super helpful and accommodating to Jerry in those moments too. So, and he still was, by the way, even after, I don't know if it was after I started, but I still like was helping or giving information to the producers after, and Kirk knew all about it. He was fine with it. So, I think I just knew it was probably one of my last opportunities to get like to do the fun content. And I mean, obviously it's serious, but I just mean like laughing.
It is fun. Kirk wants to have a good time. He wants to have a good time. He'll hate this show because it's serious and he won't be listening anymore. It'll be too serious for him. But anyway, so, Steve's leaving. Look, I know Steve certainly looked down on you because he sort of has that view of everybody. But did you kind of look up to Steve as a producer, or do you see yourself as kind of equal?
I respected him as a producer for sure, and I appreciate his work. I thought the show was fantastic. I think the show, I loved it. So I don't know. I stopped listening like out of spite, to be honest. I think I've said that. Like I think I got the text about, not the text with Jerry, or I think the one that annoyed me was about Discord. I was like, why is he texting me about fucking Discord right now? Fuck this. So I was just like out of spite, and you get in these habits and then you just get lost or whatever. But yeah, I definitely respected him. I remember like I met Steve, how he came and did his show out of a studio I was running. And so I just remember helping them, with resources, and we were dealing with satellites to get radio shows up. And all
I bet he was a real douche. Steve.
Oh, he was fine. He was in a
swinging dick, Steve Robinson.
No, because he was the associate producer then. So it was Sandy Shack was still the main producer.
Oh, Sandy.
And I didn't really know him that well, but we probably met a handful of times. But he was always good. I remember I came in for something else to Howie Studio when they moved because of a potential advertising deal that didn't end up happening. And so I always just had kind of a cordial relationship with him. Looking down on me was probably just like the goofy, I don't know, because I'd just rather be
It's just his
goofy.
personality.
Whatever. I don't know. But I never had any issues with him whatsoever or anything like that.
Can you see why he didn't gel with a lot of Minute fans?
Not really. I think Steve is just like a hyper focused content guy, and I think that
He
the
certainly wasn't
engage
the last 6 months of the show.
well, it's just, like I said, I wasn't as dialed in on that stuff. And I think, say what you want. And, I know Kirk says this about me too, but it is exciting to try new things that you haven't done before. And I think KMS was new, and that's why I think he was great. He tried new things. It was a different environment. He grew from it. And then they tried something new with true crime that maybe he found a bigger passion for, right? And some of this other stuff became trivial, right? And so I don't know, I'm just guessing, but I can kind of see how that goes, and I can see how him saying, "Wow, I really love doing true crime." If I could pair that with other content that I really love to do, whether that be political, which it seems like, or whether it be cryptocurrency, which it seems like, it kind of all adds up, right? Like it adds up to wanting to achieve kind of overall happiness, which is, you kind of found it in these different pockets sporadically. Now now go do it deliberately. It kind of makes sense to me, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting you've been brushed for the case again. I don't know why Kirk doesn't just get a proper producer that's done narrative podcasts before. I just think he's so silly not to engage someone experienced. There was sort of, I don't know, simple errors in the case, maybe. Um, there is a knack to producing these series, and I just think you should bring someone in who's done it before.
Well, I think it seems the strategy is, one, I have the utmost confidence in Harrison. I think that Harrison is super talented. I think he's
So do
passionate.
I.
And I think he's like, when he's going to get started doing something, he's going to dial into it. He's going to be
But
researching.
you can say all that, Dave, but you can't
Yeah.
tell me that Harrison will be as good as someone who's done 5 narrative series before, because there are
Well, I mean, if you
methods
listen,
and
yeah,
experience that comes with that. So
yeah. Well, you're just talking about somebody who wants to do something on I don't mean lesser scale, like from it will come out, but like when you listen to a true crime podcast from the New York Times, at the end of the podcast, you're going to hear 27 fucking names, right? And I
yeah,
think
of
that
course.
Kirk, and maybe that's part of the burnout with Steve or whatever, but Kirk values that tight knit, that close. You saw the fucking picture last night. He values having a small
But you can
community,
say
like a
that, but
small.
there are small teams of 1 or 2 people producing excellent narrative stuff.
But
That's
you can, I get where you're going on like you're trying to make it about the quality of the show. But at the end of the day, they were very happy with the success, listeners, revenue, everything I've heard about that. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Barstool was ecstatic about it. I remember when I went to Barstool before the show, just to meet the behind the scenes people and know who I have to go to for X, Y, and Z. The case came up like on 7 different occasions. So they were very happy with the product that was created. And so I see where you're going with it, but it hasn't caused a business problem, right?
No,
So
but I guess for me, I think this is where Kirk sounds his best. This is where you have that sort of nexus of all his skills, the brilliant brain, the interviewing skills, the broadcasting skills, the intelligence, the sort of bull between the teeth, the bit between the teeth and going hard at something. I think, I can see him having like, show TV, Kirk Minahan TV shows where he's doing this kind of investigative stuff, but he needs people with him who can make it a reality. So
you gotta remember too, it was his first one, right? Like,
then,
no, I know.
But then Steve, I would actually, and I would have preferred Steve to be brought back to do season 2, because
I
at
think
least you
Steve
could.
will be, don't you?
Okay.
Don't you think? Yeah.
Well, maybe it'll be Steve coordinating and Harrison doing a bit of the technical stuff.
Yeah, I think Steve, he's hinted at that, like in some consultant role where he's helping him with research, I assume.
I mean, did you listen to the case?
I listened to a decent amount of it. Yeah.
Okay. Like everything, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why I've got producers like this. I just thought they got the narrative arc a little bit wrong. And like, if they'd just slightly restructured, it probably would have landed better. But, all right. So can I ask, are you employed full time by Kirk?
Yes.
You are. Because I know you do some work on the side. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, but it's very minor, and Kirk knew about it before. Like it's relationships with, like one specifically is just a business that we built, and I told him it's somebody who came up on the show. He's family to me, and
Mm.
we built a marketing partnership with Barstool, and so it's not it doesn't take away. I literally do it in the after hours, like it's texting and calls or whatever. So it doesn't take up my time or anything like that. So I just wanted to be above board with it with him, and it's just you've seen the videos. It's the mortgage company. They're a big
Yeah.
advertiser on Barstool now, and I'm hoping actually they're going to come over to Kirk's show. So
Excellent. I was
yeah,
just curious whether it was, you were sort of part time or full time. And, you know, I was surprised that when you started producing, and you alluded to it in this, that you stopped listening to the show for a long time. And then, you know, didn't even really go back when you got the job and be like, okay, maybe I should listen to the big shows from the last year to get a feel for what's been going on. Like, why
well,
wouldn't you think that's just like the bare minimum? Like, you get hired as a producer for a show, and you sort of maybe you go back through the last year, and the shows that everyone talks about, you go back and listen to them.
yeah. I mean, I know a lot from obviously the earlier days. I mean, I know the gist of what the show is and what he's trying to do. So I don't
Yeah, but
know.
well,
I don't.
knowing the
I get what
gist
you're.
is, I want my producer to know more than the gist. If I'm Kirk
It's
Minahan,
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like, it's weird to me for you to assume that like every producer who's going to come in as new is going to know every little show
I
reference
didn't
on a
say
show
every
that's
little
been
show,
on.
but I mean, you go up to
Yeah.
Socko to do a live show, and you don't think maybe I should listen to the show they did at Socko last year to see what was in it.
But what's wrong? Like, I knew there were going to be videos. What's wrong with wanting to do like doing what you assume that your boss wants you to do in that moment from how you've been working with him up to that point, what you've been asked to do? Like, why do you just assume that it needs to be exactly like the one
No,
previous?
but it doesn't have to be exactly the same. But I would think you would still go back to that as a reference to see what happened. Maybe there's some, fun little things you can continue from that one. Yeah, I would just think you would want
Maybe,
to,
but I don't think it's like
at
the end
least
of the
just for
world to try to
background,
do
just for
something different.
background, just to feel like a diligent producer. Like,
Yeah,
I'm producing a show that's done a live show here a year ago. Let me hear how it went.
yeah, I mean that's your opinion. I don't think it's not diligent to prep for a show in a new way and just like it was preparing for the
You're not
show
answering the
the way
question
I
though.
thought. What? I mean, I
Because I mean, you
didn't
can
do
still
it, so I
prepare
don't
in a new
care.
way, but wouldn't you go and listen to the just to know what
It's not a
happens?
question. It's not you're not asking me a
So when
question.
people
You're
make
making a
jokes about
statement. You're
maybe
making
people
a
make
statement.
jokes about the car horn going off, you know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but what's like that's a show reference like you're talking about. You wanted me to listen to that specific show, which is fine, but to me there's not that much. I guess that I get that it's a live show and it's a one-off type of thing. But like that's the same thing as a reference from a show 3 weeks earlier in studio. Like that's not to me that's not the biggest deal in the world. Like it's I don't think like I'm not diligent because
I didn't say you weren't diligent.
I prepared for that show the way that I thought my boss wanted me to prepare for that show. Right? Like that's what can I say? Like
Well,
what else can I do for that?
I want you to
You're
say that
making a
I'm right. I
statement.
want you to say,
No,
man,
you're
is he
making it.
right?
It's not
I
a
should have
like
watched that
you're just making a
Sucko.
statement. That wasn't a question. You're just making a statement
Okay,
that you
okay,
wish I was
okay,
quote diligent enough to go back and listen to
okay.
the
So
document.
you employ somebody. You're the boss now.
Yep.
You're doing a live show in 2 weeks, and you've already
Yep.
done a live show at the same venue 6 months before. Would you want your employee to go back to that show to just give themselves background how it went, so when they're preparing for the next show they've got that in the back of their mind?
I wouldn't. I probably no to be. I wouldn't. I would just have meetings about that show and say, and if I thought that there were value points that I experienced, I would tell that employee. But obviously, I wasn't at the previous one. I get
Mm,
that I had access to it, but I did in that moment. I prepared the way that I felt I had to prepare for that show, the way my boss wanted me to.
okay,
So, and I
but
get
can
it,
you
but
see
I
where
get
I'm
that you're
coming from?
disappointed in that. But
Can no
I
no but
totally no, I totally see where you're coming from, but I don't think it's the end all be all to feel like you have to monitor what previously happened in the same setting, I guess. I'm still producing a show the way that I believe my boss wanted me to produce the show, I guess, if that's what,
Fair
if
enough.
that's,
I guess, I look at producers that go the next step, that want to have everything, cover all the bases, always
yeah,
cover all the bases.
which
But
is, which is fair. I'm not saying that's not
because
fair,
if
but
I
I think
was
that,
you, I'd be still listening to old shows now that you've missed. Like maybe you can't listen to every one, but there's these episodes that keep cropping up in the dialogue. I'd be going, okay, I haven't heard that one. I'll go back and listen to that tonight.
so I mean, I don't want to go into two, but not that it's crazy, but like I know certain characters or certain things that have transpired in the past because I have gone back and done my research, and I am following up on as much of it as humanly possible.
Okay.
Like, yeah, like that's my version of it. Like I'm putting in work behind the scenes and doing research for the show and for the future of the show, hopefully to see if they pan out. It's just a different way to look at it. I totally understand your point, right? Like I'm not saying you're wrong. In the Sacco case specifically, like I'm going into that show 48 hours before almost thinking like my 3 videos plus fucking
Mm.
plus Justin's 3 videos and shit like that. So I'm thinking we're covered, like all this weird stuff. So it was, I don't know. I've taken responsibility, for the execution of that show and what I would do differently and what I would think as a leader I should have done differently. I think that when I came in from the show, I should have grabbed that event by the balls as just a management thing and
Absolutely.
just do, and Kirk seemed to disagree with that, and that's fine. But I just think me going and just doing like a quick check-in and trusting that, uh not that it's a bad thing to trust somebody when they say everything's set up, but it's also like you should button things up. Like there should be a paper trail. If I get hit by a fucking bus on my way home today, there should be a way to find out every aspect of what's going to happen on October 2nd. And I believe that. I believe that before I started this job, and I didn't personally follow through with it when I started the job, and I should have. And I believe, whether anybody agrees with that, whether Kirk agrees with that or not, that's just what I believe. So,
Well, in preparation for this interview, I actually listened to your very first episode on KMS when you took over the job as producer. And that's the episode Justin pitched his full-time job to Kirk. And
yep.
literally the first thing Justin pitched was his ability to deliver live events. Um, so you were sort of thrown off there. I mean, I do have a lot of sympathy for that. I guess, when you look at the
It
text.
doesn't change anything. I still like I want to take responsibility for as much
Yeah,
every aspect of
absolutely.
it.
But why when you saw billing Barstool,
Yep.
did you not think, I'm going to call this guy and just clarify it? Like, I want to know did you not look at the message properly? Did it not go in? Like, so I know
No,
sometimes
I assumed minor expenses were already set up through whatever arrangement he had already talked with Justin. So that
right.
was my assumption on the entire, like, whether it be travel, whether it be hotel accommodations, because I knew he was coming. Because we brought that up on the show. I said it's wacko that somebody's driving 7 hours for this, and I remember we said like he agreed to it, so it is what it. You know what I mean? Like he agreed to drive
Mm.
7 hours, so it is what it is. So yeah, I mean, I would take that back in a heartbeat to say like, what the fuck? Like, slow down. I just thought we are talking like minor expenses of stuff like that, and it's that's why I'll never not take responsibility for fucking confirm. That just sucks. Just sucks.
Yeah. I mean, I think Justin really let you down. Um,
But
so I
we got to
guess,
remember too, and we haven't gone through this with Justin too. Like I don't. I mean, he answered it something with the other day. The other day, a little bit more came out of Justin. I feel like, but like with the stage, like how did that just go south? Is it just completely communication failure, or is it paired with some of the things he's going through right now? And that's what sucks. Like there's part of it which is perfect storm. I'm not turning into a positive. We're very, very, very fucking fortunate that we work for somebody that is not just is willing to make it about content, because I know he said that with Jerry the other day, but just somebody who's willing to put the extra effort in to make it right and to make things whole and to have your team's back. And I'm not just saying that to kiss ass. Like that's, I mean, this thing was basically done. I think I called him on a Monday night. This whole thing was basically done Tuesday afternoon. Like, and
yeah.
there's not a lot of bosses who would be willing to kind of be a team first. I don't know how to word that the right way, but
No, but I get it. I mean, seems like a fantastic guy to work for,
yeah.
as long as you don't want like a pat on the back or to talk to him or anything like that. But
I got Quantum Week Chris for that now, apparently. So yeah.
how, I've sort of been watching the arc of you. So you came into the show and you came in, really hot, like you were pumped up. As I said, I was listening to the first show, and I got to say, even Kirk was happy to have you there. You could tell he was thrilled. It was like a rebirth. And then, you sort of hit a little roadblock with the Ryan Whitney episode. All of a sudden, a little bit of blowback. Everyone's saying, "Shut up, Carl. Shut up, Carl. It's
Yeah.
not your
Yep.
show." And
Yep.
then obviously the big disaster at Socko. I've noticed on air you've sort of gone through phases where I can tell your confidence or is dented a little bit. Where are you now?
I don't know. I just think I needed to tone it down. It was nothing necessarily that maybe he did it like through osmosis in the sense, like just the Sago thing, like the thrill ride thing was probably more jarring because that's another one of
Interesting.
those. Not that I want to bring that like to, make a big deal out of it or anything like that. It was just like the intention was never to fucking script anything. I think you've given me shit about that. The intention was just to like give somebody an idea. I don't really have a relationship with that person. I never would have fucking been like, yeah, let's start a wrestling storyline with Kirk Minahan. It's just fucking nuts.
It looked that way.
Well, it wasn't. So that's just, you can believe it or not.
But it's
It is
written
what it is.
down. I mean,
No, but
again, the
it's
messages
it's to give
you
somebody
were
who
giving
didn't.
him lines.
No, but remember, I'm basically hiring somebody for a cameo, right?
Okay.
Like when you do a cameo, you have to put in. So I'm not saying in a perfect world, whether you believe me or not, he doesn't fucking read that shit. Like in a perfect world, he takes it, he has it, but he's like, oh no, I know the show. Don't worry about it, right? Like I probably would have done that for Ryan Whitney,
I
but
would have done that
I
first.
would not literally, but like because I know he listens to basically every show. But let's say Ryan Whitney didn't listen, I'd think I was hiring him for a cameo and put some ideas on paper or whatever. So that just it taught me to just kind of like relax a little bit more, I guess, like just that show and all that stuff, because I knew my intent was not what happened. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like just settle down, relax, and I don't know. I don't know if
Kind
that's
of let
better.
it happen a bit more.
Just be more, yeah, just be like, I guess, more natural, be more, I don't know, I don't know, just be less. He was right. I was probably jittery. I was probably like way too excited because I am excited to be in that environment. I'm excited to fucking laugh every day. I'm excited for all that stuff. So I think it wasn't necessarily a lack of confidence. It was more just like settle down, I think,
Yeah. Look, I think the show since you've taken over has been amazing. Like, just whatever I've criticized you for here, the show's been never been better than since you took over. Part of the fact is making fun of you, but
Yeah.
that's the show. I guess
I don't, by
one.
the way, I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not trying to interrupt you. I think there's a lot more to go. Like, I think that there's, I don't know if it was like low. I don't know if it's COVID, but like you want more of those like Julie DeCaro fucking shits. You want
Yeah.
more of the bad radio. We want more Minifans interacting with the show again like they used to. We want more, not just sending parody songs or whatever, but like, holy shit, I was listening to Mix 1041 and they said this. Like, we want more of that stuff because, you can't always deliberately catch bad radio like on your own all the time, or it's something like somebody experiences. They're listening to Dan Levitard and they fire whatever. I don't know. So it's like I want more of that environment back. Like I still think you can say the show's the best it's ever been. The best content. I mean that 3-week run with Kirk was like. I mean, certainly the best thing I've ever fucking been a part of. I was like Willie Cole. I mean, there were so many greatest hits in my opinion during those moments. But even the shows that maybe don't have like that memorable Willie Cologne or whatever, or Linda Marks, it was like 3 things on every fucking show. And it's like, I would love, and I bet Kirk would love to be back there. It was fucking, what was it? It was War of Roses because Mike said that a woman was a bitch from 1041. And then it was a I don't know. It was just like every show, there was 3 main things that were fucking hysterical or were angry or whatever, and that drew like a lot of emotion. And so I don't know. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's not funny. I just mean I think like I don't know. I would think Kirk would agree. I think he has agreed that there's more to go. Like there's a way to go. Like there's a ways to go.
Well, I didn't say it was at its peak, but it's
Yeah.
certainly, it's also that's Murchison's favorite period. Your first stint in charge. So look,
I can barely remember that. Right. He didn't pluck any audio from those 3 weeks. Right.
you
Was
just
that
picked your audio, basically.
yeah.
I I hear this from Kirk. People say you're a snake, but I've sort of come to the conclusion. I actually don't think it's you're a snake at all. I think you suffer from the syndrome of you're always trying to keep everybody happy, even when you're talking on air. Sometimes you sort of thinking, you don't want to step on any toes. I always think you're sort of trying to sort of navigate the line of not pissing anyone off. Even, when Justin came back from his break and you were asked about it, you gave some garbled answer instead of just saying Justin fucked up. Where does that come from? Like, do you agree with me that you probably need to nail your center? You need to find out what's at the heart of Dave Cullinane if you're
Yeah.
going to really be good on air.
If it's real and authentic, right? Like
Yeah.
if I authentically thought, obviously I know I said that like Justin had failures in those moments, but I'm accepting of the fact of I don't know what the fuck Justin's going through, right? Like I understand that mental health had to have played a part in that. So it's not authentic for me to just be like, fuck Justin
Yeah,
in
but that
that
was just
moment.
an
And I
example.
knew
There's
that
a ton of them. There's
yeah.
a ton of them.
Well, I don't hate Quantum Week Chris. That's not authentic. Like that's not authentic
Mm.
to me. I would have to find a reason where or an example where that you had that maybe I wasn't as authentic for some reason. Maybe I'm more passionate about something and I was being too safe because I didn't want to piss anybody off or want to be like, I don't have that example on the show right now. I know you think you hear it, but the only examples is like Quantum Week Chris. Like I have no fucking problem. He's the nicest guy off air. He's a little cunty to me on the air, but I kind of like it because I think it's funny. And I just try to be sarcastic back to him. Even the Carano stuff, like sarcastic back, because Carano's been nice to me. He's handled things on social media that I wouldn't handle the same way, but it's not like a big fucking deal. So I'm not like super passionate about that. But I definitely have a thing about me where I don't necessarily know if I need to be liked, but like I don't want to come off like an asshole to anybody. I want to be accommodating to people, I guess. So yeah, I don't know how that translates into a snake. The snake thing, I think, just comes from people who like behind the scenes radio people, and I'm very like gung ho and positive, and we can do this and we can do that, and then if it doesn't happen, you almost go back and you blame that guy. I feel like I'm not trying to make an excuse. That's just like what I feel like is the
Mm.
vibe, I guess. I don't know. That's the only thing I can guess because I don't know. I was never a snake to fucking Jerry Callahan. So for him to call me a snake, the worst thing he's ever said that I've done is I fucking lost a key card at the Legacy Club. So I don't even know, So
Yeah.
I don't really know. Yeah, that's a tough
Yeah.
one. That's a tough one to answer. And I hope, obviously I assume one day there is going to be authentic hatred at some point. It's just, it's got to be real.
Because if you try and please everybody, you often end up pleasing no one. Sometimes I get maybe people see you as a snake and not me, but you might, say one thing to one person to keep them happy, but then you say something else to someone else to keep them happy, and they kind of sort of cross purposes. So perhaps that's a symptom of just trying to please everybody.
It could be. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely aware of that viewpoint. I don't, it's tough right now in the moment to see the example where it applies, but
Well,
it's,
just generally on
yeah,
air, sometimes I feel
yeah,
like you're not quite certain of yourself on KMS yet on air. There's a little
yeah.
bit of blurting out stuff, and I
Oh
just
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you've got to find. I still think you actually got to find your radio voice. Honestly, if I'm talking
Yeah.
like, I think your broadcasting voice is, it's got to evolve from play the hits now. It's got to. What's the next stage for Dave Cullinane? You're
Yeah.
laughing, but I'm serious. I really
No,
like
but
you.
I don't, it's tough for me, and it's an interesting point by you. It's tough for me to like think of myself like that, right? Like I think of myself as a producer first that is just like you can easily poke at that person. But if I'm going to have a vocal, I don't know, if I'm going to have some kind of vocal role on a show, like finding whatever voice that is, I don't know. I definitely have not like overthought that in any way. I'm
Well,
just kind of
that's a
trying
problem.
to be, yeah, maybe if it's a problem, maybe, I don't know.
Oh no, not in
I
like. I
haven't
just
heard
think.
that from I haven't really heard that from Kirk minus like actually addressing it as an issue. He definitely said yesterday like the randomly blurting out stuff, which is just which I think happens more like in those random like
Mm.
end of the show, like which is funny because it's like yesterday I blurted something out about Jerry or something, which just was unnecessary and stupid. And hopefully you learned from it. But fucking 4 weeks earlier, everybody loved it when I busted out the Kelly Martin thing, right? So it's
Mm.
like
Oh yeah,
it's
it's
one of
not
those
it's not
things.
about liking it. It's about, I think, Yeah, I just think I still think you got to find your voice. That's where I'm coming
Yeah,
from.
that's fair. That's fair.
What about okay, what about criticism? So everybody knows how fucking brutal the Minifans can be. You're pretty much liked by a fair majority of them. I think you can take it on the chin, but there obviously there are still some people that preferred Steve. Even like Riggs from Foreplay, his vocal supporter of Steve, the fact that he stopped listening to the show. How do you take all that? I mean, it drove Mike to a blind school. It's driven Justin to who knows what medication he's on. How do you take all the criticism and the intenseness of the scrutiny?
It doesn't get to me as long as it's like criticism that's part of a conversation, right? Like if you truly don't like something and it's I don't know, it's like a collaborative conversation. I never mind that stuff. I said on the show, and it still triggers me to some point, is like I don't like the trolling. Like when
Mm.
it gets to trolling, it's where it's just like, all right, if you can't have a conversation about why the show sucked today, then it's not worth caring about. I don't know. That's always my problem. Like if everything just sucks, there's
Mm.
nothing I can do with that. Like
Yeah, exactly.
what can we do? You just got to like brush it off. But I understand like change, and some people are going to like it, some people don't. I mean, I'm trying to do the best job I can. I'm trying to work with Kirk the way he wants me to work with him. I want to grow in that. I want to, it's still something I'm getting used to for sure. I think I said on the show, like there's not a lot of communication outside. He kind of just lets you do your thing, and that I'm not used to that really. Jerry wasn't a lot of communication, but it was also a part-time thing for me. So, but I'm always used to like over communication and stuff like that. So there's still a learning curve, but in terms of people having a problem with me or not liking something, I don't know. There's plenty of shows I don't fucking like, and I voice my
Good.
displeasure, and so I get it, and it doesn't bother me in that way, not really.
That's a great attitude. I mean,
Yeah,
you need to have a thick skin, and you're right. There are people that just want to hate and troll, and that's what they get a kick out of. And
yeah.
yeah, no, it's a healthy attitude. I don't want to see you go away like everybody else that's been involved with the show.
No, and
Um,
but it's interesting to think about. Like we're having a conversation, so it's not KMS or anything like that. But I am like I'm interested in what turns people like to go to that route. Like, why you're a troll that listens every day? Like, why at that point? I don't understand it. Like it's like fascinating to me for some reason. But then I sometimes I think I go back and I'm like, well, Jerry Callahan watches SNL every week because he hates it. It's like, well, why do we do that? I don't
well,
understand
it's
it.
that
I mean,
classic. I mean, you probably learnt this in communications. Say a good columnist, they
yeah,
elicit an emotional reaction, and that
yeah.
can be good and bad. And I think it's the same in this sense. If you're triggering someone, that people can get off on that anger. Um,
Yeah.
but sort of, I guess one thing I've noticed from you is I think you could sort of work on expressing the way your feelings. How much longer do you have?
Oh, plenty. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry, I checked. I
No,
just
no,
want.
it's checking.
Yeah.
I think you can work on actually expressing yourself. Like, I think sometimes there's a sort of gap, and it happens to me as well, between what you're thinking and then putting that into words. I don't know
Yep.
if it's how you could work on that, whether it's writing a bit more and just trying to sort of flesh out your thoughts, because sometimes I think you sort of say things, but they don't actually reflect what you mean.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that's fair. I definitely think that's fair criticism. I definitely need to work on that. I'm definitely more in tune with kind of that jokey atmosphere, right? Like that's just like
Mm,
outside of the show, if I'm with a friend or even if I'm with my family, like it's legitimately all ball busting,
yeah,
So it's like,
exactly.
so I'm not really having these serious debates or conversations or anything like that. So when it comes to topics where like the opinion matters, definitely like whether it was the Joy Reid thing from yesterday or whatever, like I definitely think that would be somehow carving that language out a little bit more and in a better way, it would be beneficial to me for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
mean, writing's a good way of doing that, writing little notes and stuff. And like one example is when you were talking about Kirk calling his old friends.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way I took it, I know what you mean. Like if someone calls me who I've seen on the radio, sorry, heard on the radio for the last 5 years, well,
Yep.
it's going to be much easier to start a conversation. I heard you, interviewing blah, blah, Tom Brady, last year, and, you're off to the races, you're having a good chat. Whereas if someone called up from, they're an accountant. Well, you got, okay, how the book's going, buddy? It's not the
Yep.
same. And
Yep.
also it's not as interesting. Like if I'm Joe Nobody and my old friend who's now sort of a radio host calls me, I want to hear about that because it's more fucking interesting than my life. But I don't think you expressed it that way.
Yeah, I don't think I listened to the social clips. I don't think I listened back to that specific segment. I don't think I expressed it in a super confusing way. I don't think, but it was more, just really, there's a better chance of the person you're calling to like understand where you are and what you're doing than
Absolutely.
the accountant. And that's all I really meant. And
Yeah.
and by the way, like I think if I didn't explain anything, and it was the same thing with the weird debate, it's really just a conversation about like what's less weird. And there's different levels of weird. It doesn't like that calling somebody whether you're famous or not out of the blue is still weird. We're just debating like
Of
what
course.
level of weirdness. So
But
it is like this weird
if
chat.
someone's going to call me from high school, I would rather the famous person call me than the boring one.
But my point, I guess, was you would rather the famous person because there's a strong likelihood that you know what the famous person has been up to.
That's what I mean. Exactly.
That's all.
It's more interesting.
Yeah. It's just like a more comfort. Like,
Mm.
I heard his podcast the other.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Somebody sent it to me because we went to high school. Whatever. I don't know. Yeah. So that's all I meant by it. Yep.
Yeah.
I think they understood that and they were just having fun with it. I don't know. Everybody who saw those social clips that I interact with, that like family that listens or friends, like they all fucking agreed. So I don't know, maybe they're just kissing my ass. But
anyway, do a bit of writing. I think that'll help your
I think that's good. I think that's good advice.
All right, so the show now, do you like Kirk's idea moving forward to have Mike, Chris and Jared in for one day a week?
Yeah, I love more. I'm always like a more bodies guy. Like I always think that. I think it sucks that there's not and this is an ongoing conversation since fucking radio.com. There's not a lot of bodies to get to be a part of the show in studio, unfortunately. So like as every time he says like, let's think of somebody new, he knows when he fucking says that we fucking came up with every goddamn name we can think of. The only difference between Kirk and I is like, I always think Kirk makes anybody and everything interesting.
Absolutely.
So who gives a fuck who's sitting there? And whereas he just wants that, obviously, and it's fair, he wants that level of comfort, be it a fan who knows the show specifically, be it a friend who may not listen, but at least he knows them. So it's a hard thing to get right now, but I'm always in favor of more bodies. I definitely, and that's not a shot at Mike or anything like that. I think in a perfect world, like Mike would be there every day and then there'd still be more bodies probably, or somebody would be there every day and there'd still be more bodies. So I have no problem with that. I like it. It changes the dynamic of the show. It feels like he's interested in kind of changing that dynamic of the show, not just with a different person in studio every show, but also like wanting to do more interviews, wanting to kind of bring back that Enough About Me style and embed it into the KMS world. Like I like that. I love that. And that's why I asked him for more names like that. So I like it. I think that's all a positive thing. And we're learning more about Chris too, by the way. Like I feel like the last episode was a way different show than any of the other shows that Chris has done. And I know he was kind of rattled during it with whether it was the Carano and Jerry stuff or whether it was the weight and family stuff or whatever, but they're starting to like learn more about Chris, where the show's not just necessarily like movies and entertainment 100%. It's getting more comfortable there. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for the show.
I really like Chris. I mean, I've always liked him. I don't listen to Quantum Week because it's not my kind of show. I'm not interested in that sort of old pop culture stuff. But I've always liked Chris. I actually really like his podcast. What is that, New Hampshire cast or whatever?
Cast.
That other co-host is way better than Carano. They have a much better.
Well, you have a spat with Carano right now.
I like Carano. I've never been one of those Carano haters, but Chris and this guy have a great dynamic. I'm going to binge it, even though I've never been to New Hampshire and I might never go. I'm still going to.
I've been listening to a lot of it. It's good. One, like I'm the same with you. That wasn't a shot weeks ago or months ago at Quantum Week. It's just like I can't talk like that. It was actually funny. We went live. We went live on YouTube yesterday, And normally what happens is I send the feed and Justin clicks go live. It's different than some of the other things, whatever. But for some reason in our system, it just automatically went live. And as it went live, I was listening. I was trying to grab sound of Jerry talking about Kirk for the show. And the first thing I hear, so we're live on YouTube. I don't know if anybody caught this. The first thing I hear is Carano criticizing Eric Clapton's guitar playing. And I'm like, I think I was live when I said this, and I don't mean it personally to Carano, but I'm just like, in what world are we criticizing Eric Clapton? So it's like, that's great. Like, it's a super, super dialed in type of podcast. It's just not for me in that sense. I would rather, talk about how I was, fucking in the back of a car listening to Stairway to Heaven or some shit, than listen to like the intricacies of how Billy Joel is more classical than pop or whatever. I don't know. That's just not me. But that's where the flip side is like Chris is on that show, but then 2 years ago he was on this other show where it was kind of like, it was fun, Chris. And it was, not
more KMS and
yeah, not that he's not fun. I just mean it was different. So it's no, it's good. We're learning more about him and that podcast. We might have to track down Ethan. That podcast. I'm listening to a lot of that podcast too. So
great. I mean, I think Chris will just get better and better. I think he's a real talent. I think he's good on the show. And you look at how many episodes Mike has had to get where he is and build that rapport with Kirk. I've listened to Mike, way back to I can't even remember what his podcast was at EEI. But I can't remember. But I've been listening to Mike for a long time, and he had his chance full time with Kirk, and it didn't work out. And I as a fan, I'm kind of disappointed at where Mike is right now, because I think he's got a huge amount of potential. I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke up his ass. He's very quick. He's very quick. And he can jump into comedy mode. He's got that natural feel for it where he can jump into a scene with Kirk and he remembers stuff. And, I think unfortunately he sort of tripped himself up, but, I think this, Mike could have a big future if he gets away from Craig and gets some good people around him. I think he's a big talent. What do you think?
Well, I think Mike's a great talent. I think he's great on the show. I've always thought he's great on the show. I think he's, I just think the kind of rapport between him and Kirk, I actually wasn't as critical about it even in the beginning. I thought it was good. I thought Mike, I know he wasn't like a confident person, but behind a mic, I don't know. I thought we were a little too critical of him early on, and I think he grew into it faster than people give him credit for. So I don't have anything really to criticize. I think he's a great compliment. He's insanely like I said, we don't talk much behind the scenes. So for Kirk to throw something out there and Mike just be ready for it all the time, like that's a major testament to him. I mean, that's one of those things where I don't think people, not saying they need to, but it's like in radio, or at least the radio I was used to, we're talking fucking rundowns that were sent the night before. We're talking fucking email chains. We're talking fucking doing a 2-hour show and repeating it to make a 4-hour show. It is such a scripted, pre-planned thing that I don't think people give guys like Mike enough credit to be ready to bounce off of someone like Kirk. Where
do you have a list of topics? Do you have like a Google Doc?
I put together my own so that like when Kirk says, "What else you got?" I have my list of like 30.
But there's no shared document where you and Mike. Wow.
There's no shared document.
You just walk in cold.
Sometimes there's like, hey, here's this sound, or like it's usually if there's stories, like we all walked in yesterday and we knew the Joy Reid sound was out. Like we don't need to tell each other what is like the trending topics or whatever. But if we see some sound that we think maybe the other person hasn't heard or seen, we toss that out there. That's basically what it has. But I put together like my own, just kind of, it's not a real rundown. It's just a list of stories.
Go-to topics if you. Yeah. Kirk asked you for them. And then, you see Kirk has like a pile of papers in front of him usually. Is that literally just the reads, just the ad reads? Like literally Kirk comes in with everything in his brain?
Everything in the brain. Yep. It's just the ad reads.
That's pretty amazing. Like,
well, I guess it's just the ad reads. And right now still the invoice from the catering is on deck. And
I mean, that's pretty amazing that Kirk can just come in and do it. No notes. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of broadcasters about stuff like this, and most of them like to at least have something in front of them. Not much, even if it's just a word, give you cues. something so you don't sort of,
Yeah.
what's next,
It's
kind
hard
of thing.
not to come off fanboy. It's hard not to come off kissing the ass of your boss. But there is no fucking broadcaster, and maybe this is dramatic. I don't fucking know. There is no broadcaster that I have ever worked with for sure or ever been around that would have brought up that Vindog story yesterday. Just wouldn't
No,
it wouldn't have, and that was probably the best segment of the show yesterday. Like that's the memorable portion of the show. So it's like that's fucking wild. Like there was no preparation. Mike didn't know that was happening. It's so that's where I say, listen, that's just who they are. That's how they want to do the show. That's so they're probably not looking for people to say like that's impressive, but it's fucking impressive. Like
bloody oath
it.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about other Minifans? We've obviously got Chris in there. Are there any other Minifans who you've sort of eyed up and thought, I think they'd do well in studio?
Um,
Ones that are in local. Obviously, I can't
no,
come in, so I'm not fishing.
not in a negative or positive way, not really, because I
No.
just think that anybody that like I said it before, anybody that wants to go in there, I believe that Kirk can make a good show with them there. I've
Mm.
always believed that. So people like, I think Chris said that, like, he was making fun of, oh, you wanted that WEEI girl. I don't give a fuck if it's the cashier at fucking Stop and Shop. Who cares? Like, it should be, he's going to make something of that person. So I just don't think we have to always
Well, yeah,
look
I
at
think
it.
I
Look at
think
it
they
like
need to
that.
buy in. I think whoever comes in needs to buy in to the whole KMS thing. I don't think it could just be that girl from EO, although she seems smart and everything. I do think you want someone who kind of gets it. Jared gets it, even though he doesn't listen to everything. He knows where Kirk's going. He has a feel for the show.
Yeah.
I still think you kind of need that.
Well, you're thinking it. I don't know if we have a case study on what it's like if they're not, right? Like we don't have. I guess the only case study would probably be super early days with like. I don't think William Bendison was ever in
No,
studio.
he
I
was
think
just on the phone.
who was the one that when I had to ask her again, she wanted us to talk to her agent. Who the fuck was that? It was some political person in
Yeah,
Boston, and people like loved her at first or so. Or
Sue
like
O'Connell.
Sue
Wasn't it?
O'Connell. That's right. Yeah, Sue O'Connell. She's probably the best example of that. I can't remember, and that was so long ago at this point. But we haven't had he hasn't
Well,
had
I
that,
guess,
right?
yeah. I mean, even Jared, when there was a period when he was doing the show during baseball, and it was clear
Yep.
Jared was literally just coming in, and that
Yep.
was it. He
Yep.
wasn't paying attention to anything else apart from baseball, but he was coming into KMS. Even then, you could tell Kirk was getting a bit annoyed because you can't banter or anything because he doesn't know what's going on in the miniverse. So,
Yeah. But
um,
don't you think there's build up to there's a build up to get to that point too, as long as that person is willing to get there. So like let's say it's a brand new person that's never listened to KMS before. They probably have shit going on in their life, or if they're in the media or whatever, that we can pick and prod at to some extent on that first show. And as you go into the next appearance, more things are happening with them and they're interacting with Minifans based on that appearance. So
yeah,
it's like it
yeah.
can progress. So I just don't think you need
Courtney
to.
Fallon. Courtney
Courtney,
Fallon's a wannabe Minifan. I
that's
played I
true.
played a game show with her the other night. She'd
Sure,
be
I think I
someone you
saw.
could get in. I know
That's
Kirk loves
true.
her.
Yeah, I think like so my stuff with like Kirk on that is kind of I would suggest people hopefully that it's probably the same thing with topics, right? That he's not already thinking about. Like it doesn't make sense for me to text him and be like, hey, what do you think about bringing back I don't know who's sat in studio? Like didn't Steve and Tim sit in studio? Like it's not worth texting that because Kirk knows that's available to him if he wants it.
Fair enough.
He probably knows that Courtney Fallon is available to him if he wants it. My thing was always, can I think of a new name that just hasn't hit his, he knows all the Barstool people. He knows that shit. Is there somebody that's out there that maybe he'd be willing to try? The problem is this is, like I said, this is a conversation that's been had for 3-4 years at this point. So,
So I guess broadly then, how has your impression of like what content suits the show changed since you got the job? Coming into it, you would have had an impression, but I've noticed you've adapted so far. Just tell me how do you think that's changed?
I don't think it's changed too dramatically in any sense. Obviously, if there's some kind of big trending story that's not like if it's not I know he doesn't like love the politics, so it's kind of staying away from that. But sometimes there's things you can't avoid. It's usually that hybrid between somebody hopefully saying something stupid about whatever the trending story is, and then kind of the, not necessarily just the inside Minifan world, but like the world of Barstool, the world of Minifans. Like, to me, still the sweet spot will always be like finding bad radio and analyzing it and shit like that, or columns like he did with Vindog or whatever. I love that stuff. So I don't know, it's not overthinking it. You're just paying attention to as much as you can. Hopeful, and hoping shits, I'm always looking for the shit like on social media where somebody said something stupid or something like that. So I don't know. I feel like it's been kind of a lull it recently in that world. Like, I don't think anybody's said a lot of stupid shit out there recently. And the fact that people are saying they're enjoying the show still regardless just shows how fucking good Kirk is, because there hasn't really been a ton going on. It's been all fucking Afghanistan, Biden, COVID, like everywhere. That's been everybody's attention point. So just always looking for the, hopefully the stupid and funny stuff that Kirk would enjoy.
I love the drama. That's what I love. Going right back to the KNC show and then to this show, I've always loved the show drama. That's what it's attracted me to Kirk. Is
What's the drama going on right now that you think is compelling?
well, I mean, obviously, you've got the whole Chris and you dynamic and the Carano Jerry stuff, and the Sacco stuff was obviously a really good plot line. There hasn't been a lot of actually heavy drama in the last sort of couple of weeks. The Minifan world's been pretty quiet, but I just love the whole show stuff, all that stuff. I find really appealing. So I think, but I also think you just can't have a whole show like that. Like, then it's boring. It's got to be, as you say, a bit of bad radio, a bit of making fun of someone's stupid opinions, a bit of drama. Like, it is, the balance is certainly getting there, I've noticed. What about what about when Stephen Van Sant came through? That must have been a big win for you, because I think everyone didn't think it was going to happen. I even heard you in the wrap-up show where you're talking, and then you say, "Oh, it's done. I've got it." And then you go, "Actually, I haven't checked like if it's actually recorded on the roadcaster."
That was just fucking around. Yeah.
But I could hear the fear. Like, I get it as a producer. I've lost big interviews before. It's shattering. I know where you're coming from, but that along with Godfrey, I mean, they're big wins for you already. They're touchdowns.
Yeah, those don't. It's not like I'm not trying to big time anything. I don't get like I got a high off that because of the content that was created around Van Zant. Right. Like, there was a high with that just based off of the fact that it was literally like a day by day, something stupid happened or whatever. And it became a funny part of the show, which I like. Godfrey, like, that was just like, you booked him, fine. Like, I'm happy Kirk's happy about it because he's interviewing somebody he wants to interview. So I'm happy, but I'm not sitting there like, yes, I did it today in any form. I kind of, like I said, that's stupid. The show I did was booking fucking 6 guests a week. You become kind of numb to it, and you become kind of just like, it is what it is. Like, there's only so many things you can do to get the guests. Some things are out of your control and shit like that. And we certainly have things that are out of our control too, because a lot of the people Kirk wants are used to dealing with Barstool in a certain way that we cannot involve ourselves in. So, and I'm not saying that'll come up all the time, but it's certainly come up recently. So it's
really, which guests were you talking about?
Eastwood, and then it did come up with which I know it's crazy, but it's, even when you reach out for like Clint Eastwood because it's through the movie, still when you get those publicists, they might offer you something else, right? So it's like, I know it sounds stupid, you're reaching out to Clint Eastwood, but who knows what else it could transpire into or whatever. It's that new prequel to the Sopranos and stuff, so that's gone back to the Barstool publicists and stuff like that. So it's not as dramatic, but that's where I say, I kind of not need Kirk's help. I definitely need more names from Kirk to get those types of guests. But the Stevie Van Zandt thing was just crazy because it was like,
out of 10, what do you give the interview with Stevie?
I listened back to I've listened to it twice now. I listened back to it the other day. I give it from my perspective, I'd give it like a 7 or an 8. I mean,
That's really
it was
good.
super interesting. Yeah, no, it was super interesting. That's just for me because obviously I'm not a Springsteen like super fan or anything like that. So and I don't know that much about Stevie Van Zandt, but I thought it was. I like any kind of interview where it's just you're coming off like you're having a collaborative conversation versus a question and answer session, and that was a collaborative conversation. So it was compelling for sure in that regard, definitely. And I think anybody who is a major Springsteen or Van Zandt fan in general is gonna and likes Kirk is gonna fucking love it. So yeah, no. So it was great, and I want to find more people like that for sure that he's into. If he's, I mean, yesterday he was big on 90210. I mean, if you don't think I've already reached out to Jason Priestley, you're fucking
Well,
nuts. You
I had
know?
my
So
own run in with Jason Priestley, Dave. I was thinking about
okay.
this. I once got into a lift with him in Sydney.
Yep.
We were just going up 3 floors. It's just me, him, and the minder. And I didn't work out at first. Then I look around and I sort of went, Brandon, like, what the fuck are you doing here?
Yes.
And then
Brandon
we,
Walsh.
we get there and we're on the 3rd floor, but
Yep.
he's short, which is good for me.
Yes.
So Kirk's a brilliant interviewer, so I can't wait to hear Stevie Van Sant. Enough about me was, Kirk has this way of what I think Kirk does is he's obviously can ask anything, but he brings his own thoughts to the table. He's not a passive interviewer, and I think that promotes a really sort of healthy conversation when he does interviews. And yeah, there's just nothing he can't do on air.
Yep.
What about Kelly Martin? We talk about booking guests. Obviously, she books the guests for Barstool. Like, this is what I think is someone who books guests. If you can say you're from Barstool and you got this reach and it might go up as a blog that X million see it, so you're kind of being hamstrung by the fact that you can't reach out to her ever. Have you ever thought of just sort of thinking, fuck it, I'm just going to go to Kelly Martin. I'm not going to
No.
tell Kirk. Like, Kirk doesn't
No.
need to know where the guest came from.
No, I have never thought about that. The Kelly Martin like dust up. What was that? Was that the first week that I started?
Yeah.
That dust up was that was more like predicated on like me and kind of like the onboarding process of Barstool, which was stupid. I should just rely on the onboarding process of Kirk Minahan show, but I just for some reason I thought like you're supposed to notify the publicist who handles all angles of this of the guests you have. Actually, there's I think I've given credit on the show to Erica Nardini's weekly Barstool newsletter that Kirk says he doesn't get. And on that newsletter is all the guests that are coming up, big names or not, on shows, right? And so I think I had this imprinted in my brain that like you notify. I don't give a fuck if it's a deal. I mean, if it's like a fucking nobody, you don't. If it's a timely news guest, if it's Captain Random who said something on Twitter, you're not going to send her the message. But if it's a comedian who's playing a show at a comedy club or whatever, I just had this imprint of this stuff in my brain where I just thought, oh, you just notify them. I didn't ask for help booking them. I didn't do it. I just said, this guy's coming on, goodbye. And if she said, I don't want you to have him on, I would have said,
Bad luck.
Yeah, like it is what it is. So yeah, it hasn't been. That was just kind of probably just I stupid little me being a bitch during the onboarding process.
So imagine practically if you're a publicist and you get a request, I'm getting one from Barstool, say Kelly Martin. I'm getting one from Dave Cullinane. It says Barstool as well.
That's exactly what happened with the I guess the most recent one was the Sopranos prequel one. Is it said please run all requests through Kelly Martin. That's who we deal with. And I just responded back to her and I just said, we operate under a different relationship.
Just do it. Kirk won't know.
No, but
just
it's not,
it
has nothing. No, but I am doing it. But the point is,
saying just run it through Kelly Martin. Kirk doesn't have to know.
Oh no,
if he's interviewing Clint Eastwood, he doesn't care where it's come from.
You're mad. And by the way, like you're a madman. And two, the amount of times that it's like the amount of times that Kelly Martin is going to get us somebody that Kirk wants is probably not, because Kirk wants a different type of guest, right? Like he wants kind of the nostalgia type of guest that he can go long for. So I don't think like she booked like top-notch wrestlers and celebrities and shit like that for Barstool this week. Those aren't people that Kirk would want. So I don't think it would be a common occurrence that we're going to need her assistance. It's just kind of if she has crossed paths with these specific publicists, it becomes a thing. But my thing is more like if you're the publicist, I didn't do anything. Like I came off, you come off polite and whatever. They should still want to help you in those situations for publicity. So we'll see how all that stuff transpires. But
Yeah, but I mean, you can see if you're the publicist, you're getting two requests from the same company. You're
yep,
thinking, well, can't they just work it out themselves and then send me a request?
yep,
Alrighty. So look, we've taken up a lot of time, Dave, but enough about Steve cannot end without me talking to you about the Kirk Minahan network. I guess I've been slightly disappointed with what you've done around the main show. I think, and I get this, you've had to focus on the main show, so I'm going to give you a pass. But I think it's time to get the kindling going. Like the Kirk Minahan network has legs.
yep,
Where are the ideas? Like, where are your ideas? Because I'm telling you, for example, the wrap up show's never been worse than what it
yeah.
has
Oh,
been
I agree.
lately.
Well, when was it? When was it good? Well,
Well,
was there
okay, I'll
one?
tell you exactly when it was good.
Yep,
So when Justin had a different Minifan on 3 times a week,
yep,
that was good because you were getting 3 different viewpoints.
yep,
Justin's never interesting to listen to. He's not someone people want to go and hear what Justin has to say. But when he was having, he had Andrew Augustus one day, Tim another day. I can't remember. There was like 3 Minifans rotating. I think Rob would do it. I thought that was at least better because you had then a different viewpoint
yep.
to
That's fair.
topics spoken on the show. So where are the ideas of yours? Like I've pitched you a proper rundown. So say you just cut all the bullshit and you stay focused. I'm not going to do lots of extra stuff, but I just want to do one really good thing. Like,
Yep,
why wouldn't you put Justin to work and produce a rundown, with a rotating cast or something like that? There's tons of ways to do it,
yep.
to add to the main show.
Yeah, no, I love the idea. I definitely, you're right. One, definitely more focused on the main show, as you would say. That's one. Two, it's kind of I'm not gonna say I got like kind of scared straight a little bit with that, like it's not about you aspect, like which I don't intend to ever do. So I gotta rip that band-aid off and then just see what happens with Kirk. Like it's I'm not trying to like produce content because I want to be seen. I want to produce content because I'm hoping it provides value to the fan base and gets people together and gets people communicating, gets people talking
Well,
together.
you and
That's,
Justin are not going to do that. I'm sorry.
no, 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 no.
The wrap up show.
No, I totally get that. I mean, I think it's content about the show that, whether you like it or not. I assume there are people that enjoy that just content is being created
Yeah, but
after the show, whether you like it or not. I get it.
but I
I
used to
think
like the wrap up show when Justin did it with
no, that's
Minifans.
that's that's fair feedback. I'm just telling you, like you're really the first one to then now say, I don't like the current show. This is what I liked better. So you got to
Just
take that.
generally, where are these ideas? Like you do the play the hits.
Yeah, but
Why can't
the play the
no, no, but
hits
what I'm
thing
saying is
was a
why couldn't
fucking
you do
coffee
something like a
break.
pre-show, like a live show leading into a live broadcast? I know it's hard to tell because you never know when you're going to be live, but where's
Yeah.
that? Where's the after show?
No,
Where's
I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to do like taking calls because I just feel like like I keep saying on the show, I'm not a host. So I like the community interaction. So I'm totally on board with that, with doing pre-shows and phone calls. And I think I did the watch along, which I actually thought the first watch along went well.
and what happened to
In
KMS
a,
radio? So
yeah,
I thought that
KMS
was a
radio
good
just
idea.
it was a good
What
idea. It needs to be automated. Justin I think the effort level of exporting all the things. I was telling him there's different services we can, no, but like exporting 12 hours worth of shit was kind of fucked up. There are different
just
services we
audio.
can
You
use.
just, Podbay has all the MP3s. You just download them
No,
all,
but like
cut them all
yeah,
together, and then you've got a master track.
it's a little bit more than that, but there are services you can use to to automate those processes the process in a better way for sure. But your point is
I
taken.
enjoyed that because people are stupid. People are lazy. So, and people have too much choice now. So,
Yep.
if I
No, I
knew
mean,
on
listen,
it,
the biggest fucking media company in the world basically now, Netflix, right? Didn't they announce like I feel like it's 6 months ago
the
now it
channel,
had to
yeah, you
happen.
just,
A channel, right? And
yeah.
that's what I never know what the fuck to watch. I waste more time trying to figure out what the fuck to watch. But so you're totally right. And back to your question, it's all fair. One of the things that I don't really understand is like where and why some of the other shows left. Like that's
Well,
what I
this is what I
don't.
want to talk about. This is what I
Yeah,
want to talk
yeah.
about. So, I mean,
And what to do about getting them
okay. So
back.
I'm an
Yeah.
experienced producer. I produce a lot of stuff, right? I
Yep.
know one of the big hurdles is time commitment, these are just hobbies for people. They're not getting paid. So it's a bit like Men's Live. Like I can only do Men's Live when I've got time to do it.
Of course.
So I can't, carve out time every week to do it. So I think that's definitely part of it. So, which is why I pitched to you that you and Justin produce the rundown. So people's level of commitment is just turning up. You have a set of clips, you have the main topics for the week that you can just fling up there. And then you just, all these people that have done shows, you put on a Google Doc, you might have 15, 20 Minifans, and it just rotates three or four every week.
I'll give you, and I'll give you credit because it's when you did text me this idea, I actually, and this isn't why I apologize. I'm not trying to bring it back to me, but I remember when I started Great Thinkers, like it was 3 Minifans. And I think that was the first show, right? Like that was the first fan base show. And that probably imprints in somebody's brain, like, okay, fans are getting involved in content. They're taking the time to do it. Why shouldn't I take it? Like, why can't I take the time to do it? Or I'd be willing to take the time to do it more likely. So I think you're right. Like if we did either a wrap up, like you're saying, or a rundown, like you're saying, fans seeing other fans doing things is just a positive thing to see, that maybe they start saying, fuck, let's create our own.
Not only that, you take the work out of it. It's more than that. It's you just providing a structure because, people have jobs and stuff.
Yep.
You're just saying, the commitment I need from you is not producing a whole show and finding the clips.
No. I get what, I totally get what
and exactly what you say is why I first did an Aussie Minifan show, almost 18 months ago, was because I loved the Minifan show. Kirk was calling for content, and I thought, well, look, I can make content. Why don't I do something? Because, you can't want it. You can't expect it without giving a bit back.
Yeah, for sure.
And look, I've done a lot, but, do you listen to Kirking Off, the Inspector J show, any of those other things?
Yes. Yep. I listened to it. I think I've been on Kirking Off twice. I listened to it. I love those guys. We actually got sidetracked, and I think it's more because you're right. Like we need something consistent and reliable on the network. And then we can build off of it. But we were going to put Kirkin Off on the network at that point, and just it would be audio because they do a podcast. But yeah, so I listen to all that stuff. I appreciate all that stuff. I love that stuff. I think I appreciate what you do. So it's not a level of I hope it's not a level of people thinking we don't appreciate that they're creating content, because it's definitely.
I just think the network needs that Mike and the Minifans, that Justin and the Minifans, something. It's time to get moving, Carl. You've been there enough now. Like, you fucking take the handbrake off,
Fair criticism.
That fat low Justin sits there mumbling nothing into that microphone. I mean, get him to do something. He can't do live shows. He's barely got anything to do now. So yeah, that's my advice.
Fair criticism. Yep. And I appreciate your passion behind it. I know how you feel about the network. So I appreciate it.
Because for me, as someone that's so far away, the network's all I've got. I mean, I'd love to be in studio once with Kirk and have that experience, but may never happen.
Also too, and I'm not saying you said this or anything like that, but you want to feel like you're producing a lot of content for the network, and you want to feel like that's valued. And sometimes just knowing it's valued is seeing activity on that page, seeing people involved, seeing that. So I totally get it.
I loved Mike and the Minifans. Justin and the Minifans wasn't quite as good, but I just loved watching that weekend show, and I thought it was great to add to the main show. You've got a little bit of drama to tease, even if it's just Kirk on a Monday coming in and saying how bad it was. It was still fun. All right. So, look, Carl, I've got to let you go. We've been talking for almost 2 hours. Just last question then. Thank you for coming on Enough About Steve, the Enough About Me tribute show. Having a one-time producer of Enough About Me is quite ironic. So literally one time, like one show. I won't be getting Moroso on, that's for sure. But I guess, what's the future for Carl? Like, what do you sort of predict for yourself? Because I guess firstly, I don't think Kirk's going to walk away like he says he is in 2 years. He might change his setup a bit or whatever, but there's no way he's walking away. So, but I guess generally, do you see your sort of career path as maybe doing a bit more at Barstool, and what do you want to do?
I don't really. You can probably tell I'm more of a live in the moment guy. I definitely. I don't necessarily. Like if Kirk quit tomorrow because it's what made him happy, I would be happy for him. and I would say to myself, like, I'll figure out what the next step is for me. So right now, like, I'm totally focused on, growing within the Kirk Minahan show, within the Kirk Minahan community, and seeing where that takes me in the moment. And I'm not really thinking like, and you guys can say it all you want, but I'm not thinking about like what this will lead to Barstool. I want to create
No, I'm not
the
saying.
best product.
I'm not
No, I
saying
know.
that.
And I know you're saying I want to create the best possible product that keeps this thing growing, that hopefully more opportunities within this specific show happen. That I don't know. Like, I know Kirk says he may leave or may not leave. Hopefully it's growing, and hopefully it's getting more exciting, and hopefully it's getting funnier, and hopefully all these things are happening that force his hand, right? Like, that say, no, I
Mm.
want to stay here. I want to do this. And I want all these, all this hopefully growth potential to happen. So that's where my mind is at. And whether that's bad business by me, you as my mentor can tell me that.
No,
I don't know.
focus is good.
I've always been that guy, though. I've always been that guy to say, like, if I lost my job tomorrow, I'll find a way to, produce something else, or, do production for a company or whatever, So I try to live more about, like, be dialed in about this, and then see what happens from there.
Excellent. So I guess, maybe being a program director like Craig is the sort
That
of
is not
ambition.
That is not for me. Yeah, I am not. I will never be a program director. That's not for me. I think the title of program director is a little off in that specific scenario, but yeah, we'll see where that one goes.
Excellent. Well, anything you want to touch on before we go, Carl, about your experiences so far? Anything you want to ask me?
No, I think we touched it all for 2 hours here. I think this was good. I think yeah, I don't think we got into I don't know if we got into the Kirk kind of perception as a boss thing, which I think is completely like over. I think you hear it, maybe you hear, like, Jerry brings up how tough Kirk is and stuff like that. He has been nothing but accommodating. I mean, to the point of moving shows because of like issues that I had behind the scenes, and checking in on those issues and stuff like that. So it's been super, it's been a great atmosphere. It's definitely something I'm getting used to in terms of the content that we're producing, but in terms of like the work-life balance and stuff like that, it's been amazing so far. So I don't know. I'm very appreciative of the opportunities, So we'll see. Hopefully we keep it going. I don't know if I have any other. I'm trying to think of questions for
Well,
you. I'm actually pissed off. I don't have questions for you, unfortunately.
well, you did say you don't like hosting, so
Yeah, that's true.
look, I think Kirk comes across as a good boss. I think part of it is the fact that he's sort of so technically inept that he does rely on people around him to literally get audio to air and stuff. So he has to be a little bit benevolent. But I also think like that impression of him, he was in the high pressure radio industry at EEI with all sorts of shit happening in the background, program directors, Murchison, Curtis and Ken probably deserve being treated like shit sometimes. So I think it's a totally different environment. I do think Kirk's still finding his feet as a boss. I actually think that's probably the next step for him, is realizing that whether you want to or not, if you employ someone, you kind of have to mentor them a little bit. I mean, I think that you don't have to, it can be different levels of it, but I think, maybe softer touch with Mike sometimes would have helped last year,
Yep.
and just little things like that. I think Kirk's trying to work out, but it doesn't come across that he's a bad boss.
It depends. I mean, I don't know, and it depends on the type of worker that you're working with, right? Like,
Yeah, but
I know
that's
it
what I'm
comes.
saying. Like Kirk,
Yeah,
Mike needed that validation last year,
yeah.
and I don't know if Kirk would give it to him.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that specifically, I didn't listen to a lot of that stuff, but I don't like, I think, I know he said it and it comes off of like, I don't need Kirk to say, Dave, you're doing a good job today. Or like, that's just not my
Yeah,
personality.
but
I
you
try to
don't. But maybe someone like Mike did. Like,
correct.
do you
Maybe
think
somebody else
Kirk would
does.
send Mike a message saying, "Hey, look, I just want you to know you had a great week on the show. Love what you did." Do you think Kirk would do that? I don't know.
He's done stuff like that in the past. I remember when we filled
Okay.
in, he used to text us after the show. And I think like once you gain more of a relationship with somebody, maybe you just feel like you don't have to do that anymore. I don't think there's a question that I don't think Mike doubts that Kirk appreciates him in any. Yeah, he definitely knows Kirk appreciates the time, the effort, every aspect of it. I know that happens, but you're right. Like
Now he
in the
does,
boss
but
situation, yeah, in the boss situation, like there are sometimes, and I got to learn a lot of that too. Like I on my end, like I'm kind of like him in the sense of if somebody's if it's somebody's job to do something, you trust them to do it. And but that doesn't mean that you, ignore the process to get there, so that's stuff that, and I'm more of like a collaborative guy in that sense. I would never go like a boss. That's just not my personality to be like somebody's boss. So it's more a collaborative team thing. So I don't know. I don't think it's I don't think it's a major issue per se, but it's, at the end of the day, it's still like, it is a mini business that you have to be focused on all areas of it. So
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that Kirk just comes in and the show starts. I mean, I think that's wild. And the fact that he just gets up and leaves.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know what I do in that situation, but I just think it's hilarious that he's like that. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. Like I kind of get it. Like I like talking to people on podcasts probably more than I do like talking to them off air.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's weird. It's like, I don't know. It's something about like, if that's your line of work, or if that's what you always wanted to do, there's like this comfort level with that microphone. And I don't know. I've seen it with other people. Like Howie Carr was kind of, I don't know, maybe it wasn't like that with Steve over time, but like he was super quiet off air, and then he's fucking, Donald Trump's best fucking pitch man in another moment. So it's fucking wild. It's just wild. But I don't know. Now I'm used to it, so it's normal. It's not anything crazy. But yeah. So, but it's like then you get texts. Like even last night we were texting about, a lot of the stuff that you text about is more of like the big picture ideas. It's not the day in and day out kind of grinding the content ideas. It's kind of the next big thing idea. So, and that's, that means hopefully that he trusts you on the day in and day out. And now your focus, you got to have that broad focus for certain goals that you're trying to achieve. So I think it's not that you talk about it every day, but I think you overhype the boss angle of Kirk from a negative standpoint. I think he's a better boss and better like at least he's open and communicating honestly, whether it be on the show or not. That's a positive. There are bosses out there who, are fucking great to your face and then assholes behind the scenes and, all that stuff. So I think he doesn't get enough credit for being just kind of a good collaborator with people that he works with.
Oh yeah, look, I'm sure. And I guess last thing, can you kind of see, I guess I want to try and sort of paint a picture of what it's like for me, listening to the show that, so if I go back to the Kirk and Callahan days, I would stream it live or download the podcast, and then it flowed into Enough About Me, and all the while, you popped in as the one-time producer and then became this kind of character. Mike was doing his podcast and he kind of popped in, and sort of now, like years later, it's really evolved into what Kirk was kind of, I don't know, the seeds he planted a while ago. He sort of made his world a reality. I don't know how to put it, but he does have this ability to sort of attract people, and they've stayed with him, and now it kind of does make sense. It was sort of feels like destiny.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, we were even just saying, and I know he uses this terminology all the time. Is no other podcast in the world, right? Like Tim and Canton yesterday. Did I say this on the wrap up yesterday? Tim and Canton called with 11 names of Kirk's basically high school friends. And then 45 minutes later showed up at a sponsor's retail location with a fucking scale and a tape measure, and then left and drove 45 minutes back home. Like, what in the actual fuck?
But even more than that, like I when you brought up Brandon Marshall spilling the coffee at a live show they did years ago. I mean, I remember that like it was yesterday. Them that where they that whole thing, and then Curtis did his announcement afterwards, and then for like a week or 2 weeks after, they would play drops of Marshall, doing that, and the reaction afterwards, and it's still so fresh, and it comes up 4 years later.
It's wild. No, it's wild, and you're right. Like it's kind of his vision coming through, and that just shows like it's all that stuff. Like it's always on the top of his head, right? And it's always able to come up, and then it becomes part of always on the top of our heads, and it's wild. I don't think it's easy to define. I don't think there's much out there like that in the world of media. So it's super unique. And I don't know what else to say. I don't know. It's just funny. Like people A day doesn't go by where some fucking idiot doesn't say like, Dave, tell me the roommate story. Like what the fuck? Like it's stupid. It's crazy.
All right, beautiful, Dave. We'll run out of time. Thanks so much for coming on Enough About Steve, the Enough About Me tribute show. Second guest, following in the footsteps of Kirk Seamus Minahan. Thank you, Kirk, for everything you do. Carl, let the handbrake off now. Come on, it's time. No excuses. Don't let Kirk put you off when he says, "Oh, you play slap and tickle with all the Minna fans." You do you and fucking go full ball because
I
Kirk will
listen.
respect that.
Listen, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I appreciate the feedback, both positive and negative. I wish you were more into the hits. It's not my problem if you don't like music. That's your problem. But I do appreciate it, and you will certainly you'll probably see some of that shit put into action real soon, hopefully. So
Beautiful. Well, thanks for watching Enough About Steve. We'll be back with another episode. Quantum Week Chris is lined up. So, yeah, tune in soon and thanks for watching.